Everybody, welcome back to the channel. I wanted to do a circle back video to my last video, which was my favorite self-help books. And in that video, I mentioned this book, No One Is to Blame by Bob Hoffman. And a couple of you guys reached out to me, and I fixed the broken link to the adjectives that I mentioned in this exercise of the book. And someone also pointed out that this book is now out of print, and it's incredibly expensive to get. So I thought I would do the exercise that I mentioned. The exercise is called Absorption and Rejection, that the author walks you through in his own way in this book. And we'll do it a little bit differently, where I will sort of name a bunch of adjectives, and I'll have you guys do an exercise around that. The way that he does it is he has the reader come up. What you do is you pick a parent, one of your caregivers, an abusive parent or an abusive caregiver, and then you come up in your mind, or you write down an exhaustive list of adjectives, like sort of bossy, lazy, self-centered, those kinds of adjectives to describe somebody's character. And then he has you do some absorption and rejection sort of activities with it. And I do it pretty much in a similar way. And I'll walk you through these steps as we do it. So if you want to grab a pen and paper, here are the steps. You pick a parent, or an abusive caregiver or abusive parent. The next part is you sort of, as I'm reading these adjectives, you write down an adjective that really kind of describes them, really kind of nails them. And we'll go through the whole list. It's an alphabetical list of adjectives. And then what you do is you circle, when we're done with that, you circle the ones that you absorbed. Like if you learned to be bossy from a parent, if you learned to be sort of like a little bit self-centered, or, there's more to it. Once you've circled all the ones that you absorbed, you go through the list again, the list of adjectives that describes your parent, and then you put a star next to the ones that you absolutely really hated that quality, that it was something that really triggers you in other people. It's something that really bothers you, because most likely you would have rejected that and came up with the opposite. So what I mean by all that is the absorption and rejection thing is, I'll give you an example from my own sort of story. My father, who had narcissistic personality disorder, was really aggressive with people. If he felt that he was being the slightly disrespected by anyone, he would blow up at you and get nasty. So back in the day before the internet, bill collectors, they would call you around dinner time. And this is sort of landlines, and my dad would pick up, and then it'd be a bill collector, somebody he owed money to, and he would rage at them over the phone. And as I'm witnessing that as a little kid, and I hated that quality about him. I hated the way he treated people. Children are heart-based, and they just, this the way he treated us at home as well. So it was just this awful experience. So witnessing that became part of my conditioning. So I rejected that quality in him, but the rejection is sort of an equally dysfunctional thing, where I became super passive. I became super way too giving, and people could sort of take advantage of me because I was spending so much of my energy trying to not be like my dad. So I'll joke in my groups that before therapy, I couldn't send a sandwich back, because it's a big part of our psyche, is this rejection thing, or that we don't want to be like our parents at all. So I couldn't send a sandwich back because I didn't want to upset the waiter. I didn't want to upset the people who made the sandwich. I could have been lactose intolerant, and I wouldn't have sent a grilled cheese back. That's how bad I was reacting to my dad's character. And we have a lot of that going on. So that's an example of rejection. But one thing that I absorbed from my dad is my dad was kind of a lone wolf. And it's something that I didn't really realize sort of until I was doing my own work, that part of, he taught me to kind of isolate. He taught me to be removed from people. He taught me, he did it in a little bit of a different way. So that's a quality that I absorbed from him. So I found that this exercise was super helpful. So So we'll jump into it, and what I'll do is I'll do a sort of a screenshot of the adjectives as we go through them, and we'll discuss the adjectives. So again, going through the steps, you pick a parent, you circle or you write down the adjective that really describes this parent. And then once that list is complete, you circle the ones that you absorbed, like if you're sort of bossy, or you can be like a little bit gossipy or whatever, you circle those things. Then you go through the list again and you put a star next to the ones that you really disliked and you rejected. I know there's a bunch of steps here. Once you got that down, you figure out did you come up with an opposite strategy? If my dad was aggressive, I became super passive. So if your parent was super, I don't know, sort of like, you know, like gregarious, did you become super duper introverted? So that's what I mean by that. And how did that rejection of that, how does that not serve you? So in many of this stuff is that we want to come to center. We want to come to a more balanced place in life. I can send a sandwich back now. I can use my voice now. I can know that I'm not, you know, I'm just a customer and I'm not ruining anybody's life by sending a sandwich back. So that's what I mean by that. So let's dive into it, and you'll see all the adjectives on the screen. So if you're new to me or new to the channel, welcome. If you like this video so far, you can hit some buttons on the screen, preferably subscribe and like. You can't miss with any of the buttons. If you find that these videos are helpful to your recovery, that you can support the work that goes into this channel over at my Patreon. I'll have the link in the description. I don't have any third-party sponsorships on this channel because I find that they muck things up for the viewer, and that's why I don't have them on there. You can also go over to my website and check out some childhood trauma therapy coursework that I have up there. That's also a great place to get in touch with me and join my email list. And you can also jump on Instagram and TikTok and find me there, and I'll have all the links in the description to this video. So here's a screenshot. This is the website that it's from the English Club. It's in. I'll put the link in the description of this video so you guys can reference this list. This is just sort of like a grammar or an English language website that I just picked these adjectives off of. So the first one is aggressive, that word that I just used in describing my dad. And I'll just go through these, and I'll stop if there's anything to talk about the adjective, if the adjective if it doesn't make sense. So aggressive, aloof, arrogant. And again, you guys are picking a parent and you're writing these words down if it applies to your parent. Belligerent, big-headed, bitchy, boastful, bone idle, which is like a variation of lazy, I believe. Boring, bossy. Moving on to C. Callous, cantankerous. Like I picture that word as like being super grumpy, super acidic, super negative. Careless, changeable, clinging, compulsive, cowardly, cruel, cunning, cynical. So I kind of read those fast. I'll go through them again. Callous, which is like being shallow, like really not, like unempathic. Cantankerous, super negative, super nasty. Careless, changeable, clinging or clingy, compulsive, cowardly, cruel, cunning. Cunning is really like being, like I look at it as Machiavellian, which is another one on this list, or really kind of is hell-bent on getting what they want. They are not in a good way. They can really, or another version of sort of being like strong-willed, manipulative. That's how I envision cunning. And then cynical, super negative, maybe even sarcastic. And the D, here we are coming to the word starting with D, deceitful. We all know what that means. Detached, dishonest, dogmatic. Dogmatic being like unyielding, like sort of letter of the law, can be like a bit or authoritarian, rigid, controlling, dogmatic, like sort of like that. There is no wiggle room around the facts or the law or whatever. That's how I know it. Domineering is just somebody who domineering a conversation, sort of like the loudest or the most opinionated, sort of takes over. So there's that. Moving on to F, finicky, flirtatious, foolish, foolhardy, which I believe is keeping the company of fools, and then fussy. So finicky, flirtatious, foolish, foolhardy, fussy. Moving on to G, greedy, grumpy, gullible. H, harsh, lots of I words, impatient, impolite, impulsive, inconsiderate, big one here for growing up in childhood trauma, inconsistent, indecisive, indiscreet, inflexible, interfering, it's a good one, intolerant, another good one, irresponsible, I'll go through those again, impatient, impolite, impulsive, unable to control themselves, inconsiderate, inconsistent, indecisive, indiscreet, interfering, intolerant, irresponsible. Moving on, J, jealous, it's only one J word, lazy. There's Machiavellian, which he was the Renaissance political sort of philosopher. When someone is Machiavellian, they will do whatever it takes to win at all costs. They are very cunning. They have no qualms. It's part of this dark triad of personality that can really kind of fall into sort of the narcissistic world. That is sort of it's above everything is winning takes precedence, even if you sort of ruin people in the process. That's how I understand to be what that word means. Then there's materialistic. Then there's mean, miserly, which is like refusal to share or to share with others, it's like a hoarding resources for oneself. Then there's moody, which we all know what that means. Moving on to these words, going on to N, narrow-minded, nasty, naughty, kind of. It's like when I read this list, like I don't know why that, I mean, like naughty, like how like is that sort of in a sexual connotation, or naughty in a way that there is just like they are highly immature, like one spouse opens up a series of kind of credit cards, doesn't tell the other one like their behavior. Oh, I'm being naughty. Don't tell my wife, or don't tell, you know. So maybe that's a way to explain that one. Can also be, I guess, sort of sexual connotation too. So then there's nervous, someone having a parent who's incredibly anxious. Moving on to O words, obsessive, obstinate, like refusal, I'm not getting out of this chair, I'm not doing that, you know, like a very difficult person to deal with, high levels of refusal, over-critical, over-emotional. Moving on to P, parsimonious, related to miserly, that they do not want to give up. They can be very sort of overly frugal, cheap, refusal to share anything, refusal to share resources, very much for themselves, I guess. Patronizing, we all sort of know what that means. Perverse, that can be a sexual connotation, or they can just have a really twisted sense of the world, twisted sense of thinking or behaving. Pessimistic, really negative, that things are not going to work out, and they live in that. Pompous, I believe we all know it. Pompous, I don't know why I'm struggling. It's like grandiose, full of themselves, arrogant, possessive, pusillanimous, I have a master's degree. Pusillanimous, okay. Showing a lack of courage, or determination, being timid. Moving on to the Q words, quarrelsome, quick-tempered, resentful, rude, ruthless. Lots of S words here. Sarcastic, secretive, selfish, self-centered, self-indulgent, silly, sneaky, stingy, stubborn, stupid, superficial. Gonna go through those again, okay? Sarcastic, secretive, selfish, self-centered, self-indulgent, silly, sneaky, stingy, stubborn, stupid, superficial. Moving on to T, we're almost done here, guys. Tactless, timid, touchy, thoughtless. My favorite word on this list, truculent. So I'm gonna go through them again. Tactless, timid, touchy, thoughtless. Touchy, I think just like super like overly sensitive, or they literally can be like, you know, touchy. Truculent, I didn't know what that word meant when I first got, I looked it up. It's like that the person is really looking for a fight. And boy, so many truculent folks in my family. I love that word, that someone's just looking to get into it. They're looking to sort of start something. They're looking to criticize. They're looking to get a reaction from somebody, which if we have parents who struggle with some personality traits, they can be highly like seeking a reaction in others, so looking for a fight, or that just like, that toxic family thing about like, I'm in a bad mood, I want other people's to feel that mood too, and I'm gonna, get into it with them. So favorite word on the list. Moving on, there's unkind, unpredictable, unreliable, untidy, untrustworthy. Moving on, vague, vain, vengeful, vulgar, and then weak-willed. So what I mean by the rejection thing, let's just say you grew up with an alcoholic parent who was really unreliable. You may have that may have been part of your abuse, that inconsistency, the unreliability for them to sort of like show up to the graduation or pick you up from a job or soccer on time, all that stuff. And in your adulthood, you may get massively triggered if you're ever late somewhere, and you may run by a really tight code that you can never be late to anything. So that is a rejection of that trait that the parent had. Or maybe you absorb that. Maybe you kind of like, it wasn't so much that, that's what you were taught, is like you show up when you show up, which is, see how both of those things are dysfunctional. So coming to center is what I mean. So again, I hope this video is not confusing. What you do, you pick a parent, and then you go over this list of adjectives, and you circle the ones that really apply to that parent. Might take some thought, might take a little bit of editing, that's okay. And then you go through that list, and then you circle the ones that you absorbed. Like if you end up kind of unreliable, or you're not really on time, or you're a little bit laxed on those things, and your parent was too, that's something you absorbed. Then you go through the list again, and you put a star next to the words that really these were character traits that your parents had that really bothered you. And then you need to think about, did you come up with the opposite reaction to it? Let me bounce up to just what I mean by that. The opposite of you can just look up what the opposites, the antonym to these words. Aggressive, you may have become like me, a little bit passive, or there's other antonyms to that. Aloof, you may have had an aloof parent, really hated that, and then you became really engaged, that you wanted to not let people down. And that's a little, you might come across as it might be too important to you. You might freak people out in that way. Arrogant, the opposite of arrogance, sort of being humble. The opposite of belligerent, sort of, I guess, being sort of calm and sort of really giving in conversation. The opposite of being bone idle is you may have really hated the stuckness of your parents, and you may have rejected that, and you may have become kind of a workaholic. You can't sit still. The kitchen counter has to be clean. So that's what I mean by those examples. And I can't, again, I use this, for a long time I was using this exercise in most of my groups. I'll probably come back to it. It's just one of those things to get our brains thinking about a deeper level of knowing what our conditioning is from our toxic family system of origin if you grew up in toxicity. And related to that last video, guys, the one about my favorite self-help books is sort of like, everyone is sort of reading these days. They're amazing books, and I just didn't mention them, but there were runner-up, but that Bessel van der Kolk book, The Body Keeps a Score, as well as the Peter Walker book about surviving to thriving. Those are excellent books, and I just kind of wanted to mix it up and add some ones that were really powerful to me in my own journey. As always, you guys, may you be filled with loving kindness, may you be well, may you be peaceful and at ease, and may you be joyous.